Let's consider quality of life towards the end of life. Because I'm an artist, I'd like to focus on the creative potential that arises as people approach their final days. We don't think of end of life, usually, as a time of artistic productivity, but we should. This is an important time for us to create and to share ourselves. Facing death gives an unprecedented perspective, a perspective that no one can inhabit fully until they approach that door. In our culture, life ends in an institution. 90% of Americans say they would prefer to die at home, but 75% of them die in a nursing home or hospital. These institutions are good at prolonging and preserving life, but they are not designed to nurture the creativity of those who live within. I'd like to offer a completely different possibility. What if creativity was the focus of the final months of life? Not just mere survival, but actively sharing the accumulated experience of a lifetime. What would it be to see each person approaching death as a creative being, which they definitely are? What would it be like to treat them as an artist? Let me show you one way this can be done. I live part of the year in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I work as a pianist and composer. For the past 2 years, I've had the privilege of working with a group called Lifesongs, an intergenerational art project that promotes inclusion and dignity for elders. Lifesongs is a program of the Academy for the Love of Learning, an organization envisioned by the American composers Leonard Bernstein and Aaron Stern. Lifesongs hires professional artists to create original work with hospice patients and nursing home residents. Through artistic collaboration, public concerts, and other community events, we reconnect elders with their creative capacities. This is Tony Molinar, one of my collaborators in the Lifesongs project. He loves to laugh, tell stories, sit in the sunshine, and eat New Mexican food. He's also blind and unable to stand or walk. He has 2 children and 5 grandchildren and lives with his wife, Mary Lou. Tony was a skilled craftsperson, a silversmith, and ceramics artist, but he had no previous experience of working creatively with music or language. So how do we get to know each other? In December 2015, I got an email from Lifesongs' director with Tony and Mary Lou's phone number. Their hospice nurse had identified Tony as someone who'd be open to receiving visitors, someone who might be willing and eager to share his story. My first meeting with Tony was challenging. He was in and out of consciousness. He had trouble understanding what I was saying, and I had trouble hearing what he was saying. He was confused about who I was and why I was there. But there was also a lot of potential. When I'm working with an elder, I listen for the stories that they are most invested in, the ones that draw out emotion. I also listen for stories with a bit of the unexpected, stories that offer a fresh take on how the world works. I asked Tony a few questions about his military service, and he poured into descriptions of his time in Vietnam. I remember him telling me that he slept poorly for an entire year because a night ambush was always a possibility. When he finally arrived home, he slept for almost 24 hours straight. This is us working together. Tony and I met weekly over the course of 4 months, sometimes twice a week. In the first few sessions, we got to know each other better. In our second session, Tony became more articulate and started sharing much more. He remembered me and stopped asking why I was there. Tony always thanked me for my visits. Gracias por visitarme. A ti, Tony, a ti. I asked Tony about the music that he loved, and we started listening to some of his favorites together. It was very clear that Tony was deeply moved by music. When I would play a song for him on headphones, with the volume turned up loud enough that I could hear the sound bleeding through, he would start to cry. Every time. After a few more sessions, we became even more comfortable. Tony's wife, Mary Lou, started to invite me to have lunch with them after each session. The food was spicy and unbelievably delicious. Nothing compares to a homemade stack of enchiladas or pozole made in the southern New Mexican style. If it was a weekday, their son Marcos would often come by on his lunch break. If it was a weekend, I would sit down with Tony and Mary Lou's grandchildren. Tony's stories would continue over lunch, with family members chiming in about their own experiences. Eventually, I suggested to Tony that we write a song together. I had this in mind all along. Fortunately, Tony agreed. He had an affable way of saying sure to most of the things I suggested. That said, writing a song was something Tony had never tried before. I admire the courage he showed in accepting my request. I started bringing my keyboard into his living room, playing little snippets of music to accompany the words that he had shared with me. The first song we wrote together was a ballad about Tony's boyhood dog, Viejo. Viejo was Tony's teenage sidekick, and also his teenage drinking buddy. The two of them would share beer together, and then find themselves in all sorts of trouble with the law, and worse, with Tony's grandmother. Later on, we started writing a song about the day he returned from Vietnam. At the age of 23, Tony was drafted into the Army, and the year he spent in combat was the most difficult of his life. Tony found that by telling his story, he learned more about his military service. Bringing up traumatic memories was difficult, but it also brought him to new depths of self-knowledge. He said, "I learned how to talk about Vietnam. Before, I would just shut up." At end of life, people sometimes feel the need to review certain experiences, especially the ones they've not had a chance to process completely. Mary Lou said that Tony shared stories in our session that even she had never heard before. Giving our elders that space to process and express their experience is immensely valuable. Working with Tony also changed me. I softened immensely in the presence of that sweet man. His life had ripened him beautifully. Though his body was decaying, his loving character remained fully intact. I want to emphasize that Tony was a full creative partner in this process. Most of our song lyrics quote him directly or indirectly. Tony also took an active role in creative decision-making. I would approach him with 2 or 3 directions that a song might take, and then give him the executive power. Does the melody go up here or head back down? Do we want a dark chord or an optimistic one on the word again? Opening up creative control to Tony meant that I could authentically go far beyond my own experience. Together, we created something that neither of us could have done alone. The process and the results were deeply satisfying. Let me share Tony's song with you now. Day I came home from Vietnam, I started off on a plane. The Greyhound bus brought me closer to home through clear sky desert terrain. I saw Ray at the station, he brought me home again. When I saw the tears on my mama's face, I just couldn't hold it in. Walked with my mama's hand in mine, drinking up the morning sun. Took me down the old Pueblo road where this little boy used to run. Walked up to the adobe porch and I heard my papa's steps. Donde has estado, mijo? I held him and we wept. asked about the war, I said, I don't want to talk. Mama said, the dog howled for you every day. I couldn't wait to see my little dog again, but his broken heart had passed away. I went out to my 63 Chevy, drove over to Mary Lou. Papa offered me a cold beer. I said, thank you, I'll take two. But before I drink a single drop, I have to see a face. After one long year in Vietnam, my heart is out of place. Mary Lou waited for me. She kept my letters too. I dreamt often of her brown eyes. And when I hid in the dark from cannon fire, she was my reason not to die. She was my reason not to die. Called me a hero, some people called me names. We didn't know what we were fighting for, but we fought hard just the same. Through muddy jungles, we ran to survive. I don't know if I did good there, but I made it home alive. I still dream of Mary Lou. Her kindness makes me grin. When I hear the sound of her loving voice, I know I'm home again. Lifesongs presented the day I came home for about 1,000 people at the Lensic Theater in Santa Fe, along with 10 other works composed with our elders. We hired a band of professional musicians and produced these pieces at the highest level possible. Tony was able to make it to that concert, and 16 of his family members came to listen, to witness what Tony had created. They now have a singable legacy from Tony and new memories to share with him. This kind of work is also inspiring for the broader community. Everyone who attended that concert saw the possibility of a deeper relationship with the elders in their lives. And we witnessed an expanded vision of the creativity in all of us. Art is not just for artists or for any particular kind of person. It is the ancient mark of our shared humanity. All of us have the capacity to create, and collaborations between professional artists and lay people can unearth a vast spring of creativity that usually goes untapped. So let's get together and get creative at any time in our lives, but particularly at the end of life. We need to bring death and dying out of the closet, and our culture needs to reconnect with the wisdom of its elders. We have layers of stigma surrounding aging and death that need to be lifted and overturned. We also have wisdom acquired over lifetimes available to those who would simply listen. And we have elders yearning to connect and create during these final pivotal moments. What better way to do it than with a song? Thank you.